Hello, everybody. My name is Harry F. Ray. It is a delight to be here with you. This is also my very first convention, so it's wonderful to be talking to you. I'm an author. I'm originally from Glasgow in Scotland, hence the queer accent, so to speak. And I'm an author of lots of different gay-themed books. I'll be reading an extract from the fifth installment in my queer sci-fi space opera series, The Galactic Captains. Now, the first four books are all available from 9 Star Press, and the fifth one, Altered Tides, will very hopefully be available very soon in the next few months or early next year, also from 9 Star Press. And although this is from the fifth installment in the series, has no spoilers, hopefully. It is essentially a small standalone piece to introduce you to the main character in this Galactic Captain series, which is a black queer man called Alice, who is the main protagonist in the series. So without further ado, I will start the author reading. It will be around 10 minutes. And if there are any questions, please throw them into the chat and I'll address them once I'm done. Translation complete. The metallic twang of the wrist tech woke me. I don't know how long I've been out for, but long enough for it to listen to whatever conversations have been going on around and build up a rudimentary vocabulary. I shifted uneasily from the dream world I've been swimming inside for what could have been a lifetime. I'd imagined Franks and I in the cockpit of a ship, diving from world to world, crossing frontiers of empires and bouncing between galaxies while holding crystal cocktail glasses in our hands. I drank deeply from my frosted glass. It's made of liquid galenium and lemonique juice, Frank said. We both burst out laughing, and I laughed all the way into consciousness. Up here, for it felt like I was high, a breeze blew in from a wide open window I couldn't see. The slight wind washed away the otherwise hot and heavy air, which edged on uncomfortable whenever the breeze quietened down. I shuffled off the bed, keen to get a lay of the land that I was an involuntary guest of. I wrapped a sheet around my shoulders and folded it across my body to keep out the breeze, which was now edging into the cold side. Beyond the netting of the bed, I was in a large stone room, the walls rounded and curving up towards a dome. But here it was made out of smooth stone or clay, not rough rock like the last place I'd been in. A range of pottery lined what felt like a palace bedroom, large pots and shallow bowls scattered along the walls. Then I noticed the source of the breeze coming from behind the bed. I padded with bare feet toward an archway leading out to a broad balcony high in the sky. Without even edging outside, I caught the breathtaking sight of a nighttime sky from another galaxy. Unfamiliar patterns of stars sparkled in the black sky. Beyond the horizon was a hint of light blue. I had no clue of the time, but it felt like this world was approaching dawn. I stepped a bit further out, wrapping the sheet closer around my body to keep the cold air out. An entire city of stubby, square stone buildings and clay-colored domes rushed far below, bounding between narrow streets leading to a high wall surrounding the settlement that rose in the distance. Beyond that, there was wilderness, then craggy mountains painted dark yellow across the emerging light blue of the horizon. It almost reminded me of my room atop the Capitol Hotel in Johnston, gazing out in the city of ice and stone built inside a crater. But in place of white snow and black rock were dusty streets and terracotta homes. "You're awake," a voice said behind me in the balcony, and I jumped in utter terror, practically losing my sheet in the process. "What the infinity?" I spun around and saw her. She said it again, "You're awake." But the movements of her mouth did not match up to the sound I heard in my ear. The wrist tech had taken over, using its capacity for universal translation to instantly turn whatever words she spoke into standard galactic in my ear, and turning my words into a language she could understand when I said anything. I hated this function of the wrist tech, the disconnect between the words a person spoke and what one heard in their ear, plus one's lips and tongue moving in a different direction from what the brain expected, it always left me with a cracking headache. But the woman who spoke did not look to be in a hurry for an answer. She smiled kindly, but exuded pure power. Here she was standing atop what seemed to be the tallest tower in this whole world, all alone with me. She leaned back against the parapet surrounding the balcony, which looked to me like a sandstone in the starlight. And unlike the only other creatures I'd seen who'd been dressed in all white linen on this world, she wore tight, practical trousers and a simple woven overshirt with a thick, leathery belt wrapped around the middle so thin and bony she looked malnourished. The buckle was the colour of unpolished gold, much like her hair, which seemed to contain weeks upon weeks of dust and grime. But she flicked the dirty hair to one side and stepped forward, joining my side and gazing out into the sleeping city. My priests say you are a god, she said, again her mouth moving with a disconcerting difference to the words I heard in my own ear. The universal translator built into the wrist tech had at least done its job. I stood quietly. There wasn't much else to do but marvel at the absurdity of crash landing on a world with no way home and being hailed as a deity. I wrapped the sheet tighter around me. But I am not so sure, she said, not thinking I would understand. She turned to lean her elbows against the parapet and gazed out at the dark, sleeping world below, while I kept my eyes firmly on the starry sky above, desperately looking for any signs of spacefaring life in this new galaxy. Are you in charge here? I asked her as the chilled air made me shiver and my unused muscles began to ache. My tongue twisted in ways I would never suspect as a universal translator chip overrode my brain signals. It was so much easier when everyone at least knew rudimentary Standard Galactic. I'd even take the hissing plurals of my globby old boss Javert over the incongruous clashing of mind versus wrist tech. But her face dropped in disbelief as my mouth spoke the words in her own language, the wrist tech hijacking thoughts from my brain and turning them into another form of speech. Through the darkness and the whites of her eyes flared as if assessing how quick she'd been to assume I was not actually a god. In charge? She asked, swallowing tightly. Do you, I pointed at her, rule here? I swept my bare arm over the nighttime vista like a pompous Kylari noble wrapped in my silk robes. All I needed was some crystal high heels and I could be the next emperor of a million suns. Ah, she nodded. Yes, I am king. She pointed at herself, and I waited a moment for the translation to correct itself, but it didn't. Queen, I suggested, listening closely to the actual sound the rest tech had caused my mouth to say. It sounded almost the same as the word she said, which had translated in my ear as king. Mark, it sounded like, but I couldn't be too sure. The universal translator broadcast the Standard Galactic in one ear, but left the other ear open to hear the language directly. Mark, she said again, pointing to herself. Na morka alaka, kema amork. I've been concentrating on her words, so I hadn't heard the translation. I quickly tapped my wrist tech for a repeat. The sight of the shiny metal wrapped around my lower arm seemed to intrigue her further. I figured this wasn't the only piece of metal she noticed on my body. King, the translation repeated in my ear. Not queen, not wife. More like she-king. Ah, Mark, I said with a brief bow, enjoying the brief sensation of my mouth aligning with my brain. Then realizing my mistake, corrected myself again. Mark. The she-king seemed to like that. She smiled and turned away from her kingdom and pointed inside. You must be cold. Come on me. That didn't sound right. After I followed her inside, the wrist tech gave a corrective twang and repeated itself. Come with me. Yes, communicating in Standard Galactic was definitely easier. Back inside the palatial room, she led me behind the bed to a hollowed-out square in the floor covered in cushions surrounding a brick table in the middle of the dip on the floor. It looked out onto a glassless window, supported by 3 thin clay columns slightly narrower than the width of a human person to keep anyone from falling out into the city below. The view downward was much the same from the balcony we come from. An endless snaking of dusty streets of squat red buildings squashed up against each other. An ancient city if I'd ever seen one. A few homes I noticed had a flickering flame inside. It reminded me so strongly of the monastic villages back on my homeworld, Teva. Simple brick huts crowded around the foot of the holy mountain of souls, They preferred to live in the old ways, without technology or even running water. When I used to fly my fighter ship over their village, I knew the dawn was coming when inside the huts cooking fires were lit, unfortunately exposing themselves to Cretan bombers. I shivered at the memory and blinked away a stinging tear. Sit, please, the she-king said. Keeping my sheet carefully intact, I edged into the pit of pillows and stared beyond the city walls to the craggy mountains and the merging blue light beyond the horizon. Those crags felt familiar. My ship must still be out there in the mountains. Infinity knew what state it would be in, but I had to find it. I at least had to know if forever I would be trapped here, in this galaxy, on this planet, and in this cage. Drink, the she-king said, leaning down and handing me a small clay cup. She slid into the pillow pit herself and took a seat to my right, taking a sip and placing her own cup on the table, then leaning against the pillows, looking directly at me. I was suddenly struck by the feeling this was her own bedroom. I hope this won't put me back to sleep, I said, taking a sip of the warm minty tea. No, no, she said, your body was broken when we found you. Our priest healed you. I flexed my arm, painless and as strong as ever I remembered it. Thank you. The she-king nodded and reached for her clay cup. But with another sip, I noticed she'd finished it while mine was still full. Perhaps this was a ruse to trick me into drinking a poison that required a cupful to work. But I survived this long thanks to them. It seemed strange to heal me before only to poison me again. You came from the stars, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I did, but many, many stars away. Why to here? She asked, without the pretense of nicety. If I was an invasion, or the preface to one, a king should know. I'm lost. She seemed to settle at the simple explanation. Where is your home? I laughed while drinking my tea. That was a loaded question, and it might take me till beyond dawn to answer fully. Surely a king did not have time to sit and listen to my tortured tale of escaping Teva for the outer verge, trafficking Cree to Targaline with Franks, and then branching out to work for Javar's smuggling operation before getting caught up with Uko, Churo, and the Union of the Outer Verge. No, it didn't sound like a story a king should hear. My home was destroyed in a war. I survived, but now I'm lost. The king's eyes softened. She swept back her hair and shuffled closer to me on the pillows. Almost close enough to touch me. She seemed genuinely touched by me, the traveller from another star that she did not know, and almost sad for my lost home. I am sorry, she said. You will always have a home here. You have my word. She said it with a rock-hard stare of determination. The she-king was young, but weathered. I could imagine her having won some great battle to sit where she was, atop this tower of clay and commanding white-robed priests to bring star gods to her chambers. My experience with priests might not serve me well, but I had better luck with strong-willed women. I hoped I could trust this one too. By what name are you called, space traveler? Alice. Alice, she repeated. I'm Medalia. Medalia touched her temple and then her heart, and I followed the gesture as she nodded along. Thank you to your people for rescuing me, Medalia, but I leaned forward, the linen sheet falling to my waist and exposing my bare chest. I quickly wrapped it around my shoulder again, incredibly aware I was still basically naked. I must tell you what I saw from my ship. This world is in danger. Yes, she nodded, sitting back on her pillow, like the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. And I suppose it did. The rains have not come in 2 years, she said. Rains? No, a collision. There's a blue planet, the same size as this, edging into your orbit. You must have seen it in the sky. Aquina, she told me, nodding, as the city below started to brighten with an azure dawn. This world is dry, she said. We have no water. The rains, they come once in a generation, when Aquina swallows the sky. For 40 days and 40 nights it will rain, and we will rejoice and open our jars and our reservoirs, and we will save every drop to last us for the next 40 years. But our bores, they are empty. We have been waiting for 2 long years, and only a god can help us now. I'm sorry, I really am, but I'm not a god, I'm just a man. Medalia sighed, and I felt her frustration, every last drop of it. That's what I feared, she said. So that's the end of my extract from Altered Tides, the 5th in the Galactic Captains installment, which will be coming out soon, I hope, in for 9 Star Press. Thank you for the little applauses in the chat box. I can see them. I hope we have a couple of minutes for any questions that may come up. So please do fling them into the chat if you have. If not, also great, and we will be able to move on to Bob very soon. And just a little promo for myself, I'll be on a panel in a couple of hours time at 1 p.m. Eastern time, talking about religion and queer intersectionality with a bunch of other amazing panelists. So that's coming up at 1 p.m. Eastern time shortly. Thank you again for the applause. Thank you for listening to me. It was a pleasure to read that to you. And if there are no other questions, fingers crossed there aren't, then I will hand my proverbial mic over to Bob. So whoever does the mic moving, feel free to make Bob the mic person, and I will sit back and listen to Bob.
Well, hey folks, thanks for coming to our reading. I'm Bob Angell. I write under R.R. Angell, and I'm going to read an excerpt from my novel, Best Game Ever. I don't even know if you have like my virtual background or not, but here's the book. And it's also one of the selections in the Pride Month Story Bundle this year. So that's pretty cool. You can go to storybundle.com/pride and check that out. Anyway, this is a slightly condensed version of chapter 1. Miles and I have never truly been friends. We're more like mating cats without the mating part. We're fine working together in share space through our Augies or in a virtual reality game. Our avatars and game characters are friends. But lately we didn't get along well in real life. Miles is gender fluid, which means they sometimes are male, sometimes they are female, and most of the time they're somewhere in between. I've always been fascinated by them, but it's fair to say they're mostly frustrating. With Miles, you never know who you are going to get, except in VR gaming campaigns, because they are always a black mage. You can count on it. Maybe that's why I was impatient for the new Psycho VR system upgrade. We could go on a mission in Realm of Quests with our usual companions and call a truce. Maybe talk things through while fighting a monster or something. After what I said last week about their homophobic, bullying, egocentric gorilla of a boyfriend with the IQ of a baseball bat who was beating the life and happiness out of them. Yeah, I said that. Miles told me the only way I could make them happy was if I jumped off a roof, got eaten by a dragon, or stepped into a different dimension and disappeared entirely. We hadn't been on a campaign together since then, and I wasn't sure they'd cast a spell to save me anymore, even if that meant the whole team lost. I'd spent Monday's data signal processing class in the back, ignoring Professor Lieber's notes scrolling across my Augies and staring down at Miles in the front row. I did feel bad about what I'd said to them. I could have been more diplomatic, but I'd never been any good at that kind of stuff. Besides, someone had to say something. It certainly hadn't killed Miles' fashion sense. Miles had a metallic silver headscarf covering their brown hair and hiding the frames of their Augies. A lime green top under a hot pink overshirt with rolled up sleeves highlighted their pale forearms. CB, the personal AI assistant I'd made in high school, and the project that won me a partial scholarship to Bolin, chose that exact moment to interrupt my thoughts. You have an urgent message from your roommate. JV says to tell you that the new operating system finished its install and Virtuella is killer. Flying Squirrels is loaded and ready to play. He doesn't know how long he can wait for your sorry ass to get back before he takes to the air. Annoyed, I blurted out, "Not now, CB." "Mr. Papineau?" Professor Lieber called up from the stage. "Do you have something to say about this particular transformation?" "No, sir." "Need I remind you that all devices should be set to class mode?" "I forgot. Sorry." I wanted to disappear. The professor waved his e-chalk at me and went back to lecturing. The class surprised me by ending in the middle of a daydream. I bolted out to the quad and hurried toward my dorm, dimming my Augies to cut the early March sun. The groundskeepers had mowed during class for the first time this year, and the air smelled like fresh cut grass, bright and green. Spring was coming, but it smelled like it was already here. "There are 3 messages for you as follows," CB said through my Augies. "Sid says he is up for the cafeteria tonight if you are. JV ordered you to be back in the room by 5 or else. Shang called your burrito stunt juvenile and promised you will pay for it for the rest of your virtual life." Out on the quad, a few kids tossed a frisbee around in the bright sunlight. A nice breeze rustled the oak leaves far above my head. The sun was warm. Maybe I'd put on some shorts when I got home. JV's in my room is on the 14th floor of Tower 2 on the north side. "Hey," I said to JV as I entered and tossed my backpack on my bed. "Ready for some squirrel action, Robbie? I installed a new patch for the beta version." JV, shirtless and in jeans, swiveled around in his chair, guided by whatever he saw in his Augies. I stood in the room, but not in whatever virtual space he occupied. Yeah, I'd had an initial crush on him, but that was almost 3 years ago. Yeah, I still look sometimes. If you have a nice scenery, you look, especially if that scenery happens to be on the swim team and is sitting there naked from the waist up and wearing Augies that make him look like a tech rock star. I peeled off my jeans and hunted for shorts. What's the beta version do? It's optimized to use the new Virtuella AI game engine. Virtuella is supposed to maximize your experience. Where have I heard that one before? "Robbie, Sid wants to know about dinner." I turned to JV. "What are you doing in there?" "Finishing the design on the replacement control module. It's stronger, so the gears won't slip out in heavy winds. It should also spin more easily, allowing the beast to get more power from lighter wind." JV took off his Augies and put on his Psycho VR game visor and powered it on. "And how is CB today?" "Fine. I can clone one for you if you want." At that, he flipped up his visor and laughed. "You say that all the time like it's a good thing, and I always say no. Do me a favor. If you ever give him a body, make him ugly." "What? Why?" "So you won't fall in love with him and ignore the rest of us." JV laughed and pointed at my Psycho VR visor sitting all by its lonely self on my desk. "Enough real stuff, Game Boy," he said. "The new Virtuella engine is running the show. Want to fly?" I slipped the VRV on my head. The new AI virtual reality game engine came with a new interface, higher definition, and was much more intuitive. I pawed through the enhanced game selections until I got to flying squirrels, and then I was in, and my old body was there waiting for me. I hit resume. JV was already gliding between the high-rise buildings, searching for prizes and unattended balconies. His brown fur and the membranes between his limbs were about the same color as his real skin, and anyone can tell he was an athlete just by the way he moved, even in cyberspace. He glided onto an empty balcony and landed beside a patio table where plates of steaming chestnuts were laid out as if for someone's dinner. I landed beside him just as he chowed down on one of the meals, picking up 50 points. "Leave some for me, okay?" JV turned to me, smoothing out the fur along his snout and flicked his bushy tail as he moved aside. As I made to eat the other plate of food, I heard a shotgun cock. "Fly!" I yelled, but JV was already away. The shotgun blast hit me from behind, and I died in a red pixelated haze. My squirrel reinitialized on the ground by the re-up ventilation shaft. I spread out my arms and leapt into the updraft that would carry me skyward. JV was circling up there, arms and legs stretching and shaping the flying membranes between them, his stabilizing tail trailing behind. It's going to take you a while to get back up to this level," JV said, his voice next to me in our dorm room, but his furry body way up among the clotheslines. "I'm on my way up," I said. Flying squirrels is a stupidly simple game, but sometimes you need the comfort of simple tasks, uncomplicated by magic or extreme weapons and violence. I heard chimes above. JV yelled, "Score!" and dove off the balcony. He was 12 stories above me and holding his arms by his side, diving fast and angling back in toward the old-style alabaster building across the street. I heard a gun blast up there, An alligator in a bathrobe leaned over the railing and trained a shotgun on JV. Before I could yell a warning, JV popped open like a parachute to break into another balcony as the double-barreled blast shattered the concrete overhang just under him. Pat yourself on the back, JV. That was sweet. Above me, JV said, "Oh, I wonder what this is." Then something exploded. Concrete and railings rained down between the buildings, along with what was left of JV's mangled squirrel. "Ouch, that was fun," he said. "Guess that virtuality upgrade is working." "What did you find?" "A gargoyle of some sort. That's new, huh? Never seen one before. I don't advise petting them. They blow up." "You're crazy." "Hey, could have been points. Anyway, no real consequences. It's not like they can really kill you. I think this is a good time to pause. I'm going to fly down to the cafe for Java and a bagel before work. Want anything?" I paused the game and flipped up the visor. JV was already standing and pulling on a Superman t-shirt. He pocketed his phone, grabbed his backpack from his rumpled bed, and looked at me hopefully. From our 14th floor window, I could see that it was going to be a nice evening. "Okay, hang on, I'll go with you." I pulled the game gear off my head, stood up, and slipped on my Augies. "You are meeting Sid in 25 minutes, Robbie." "Shut up, CB." But he was right, so I sat back down. JV motioned toward the door. "Let's go then. I don't want to be late." I can't. Sorry, CB just reminded me about dinner plans with Sid." "So, CB's your mother now, too." I glared at him. "You don't have to get pissy. CB's a very useful tool." "Thanks for that." "Shut up, CB." "Well," JV said, "for one thing, he's always talking to you, even commenting on things from what I can tell. He's like an invisible third roommate and your new best friend. Being roommates is not like what it used to be." "He's growing, he's learning all the time. He's so much better now." "Yeah, well, he's invading our game time and keeping you on a short leash. You can't even go for a quick coffee." "Hey, we have plans." "I hope you and CB have a great time." JV stomped out, leaving the door open to the music up the hall. I flipped the VRV down and kicked back into the game, reorienting, looking for food and points. I wanted to ignore just what happened. "Robbie?" "Robbie, you need to get Betty." "Just 10 minutes, CB. That's all I ask," I said, launching into the air and gliding across an open space toward what I hoped would be points and a prize. I didn't last 5 minutes. The klaxon sounded, scaring the hell out of me. I even forgot to pause the game, just took off the VRV and looked out into the hall for smoke. Kids ran from their rooms, some heading for the stairwells, but it wasn't the fire alarm, I realized. It was the shelter-in-place alarm. I shut the door and went to the window. Students ran down the hill toward the dorms between the buildings. I heard sirens echo off the towers and cranked the window as wide as it would open to get a look down there. On the terrace around our building, people crowded near the coffee shop entrance. A campus cop waved them away, trying to clear the area, but that's all I could see from our side of the dorm. "CB, can you tell me what's going on?" "You're the one with his head out the window." "Give it a rest, CB. You know what I meant. Help me for a change." "There are a lot of OMGs and expletives. People are posting blurred pictures of somebody on the ground in a pool of blood. It appears as if someone has jumped from our building." "You're kidding, right?" And that's when the cops banged my door open, guns drawn. Thank you. Okay. I'm gonna look at chat. I look in the QA. All right. So, thank you all. It was wonderful reading to you. And so any questions? If not, we can go ahead and move on. So you can always find me at rrangel.com, and in all the online bookstores and so forth. If you'd like to see best game ever in your library, go ahead and request it from your librarian. That would be awesome. That does work. Oh, here we go. Where do I find my work? Well, actually, a long time ago, I worked in Silicon Valley and was involved briefly trying to sell virtual VPL research, some goggles for a new game that they were working up with Sega of America. Anyway, so I got the idea for the book back then. That was around 1992. So I had a lot of personal experience with that. I used to be in tech and all that kind of stuff, retired now, and thank heavens I'm just able to write now, which is a really wonderful thing. But I'm always been a techie, and that's just kind of what I do. So favorite sources, I read the newspaper, sometimes I read journals. I have friends who are still in the business. I have, yeah, once you're in it, you keep your ear to the ground, as it were. Technology, science, all of that has always been a draw for me, and I just seem to absorb it like a sponge. So anyway, again, here's, you see that? And then there's a couple other little short things that you can get online, available Amazon, Smashwords, and again, the best game ever is now in the Pride bundle. So happy Pride, everybody. And thank you all so much. Definitely want to plug the panel that we're on. Several of us are on at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time tomorrow, Sunday, June 21st. And the topic is, how does our queer panel influence the queer sci-fi future? So we'd love to see you all there. And with that, we'll let you go. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Antonia Aquilante. I hope everybody can hear me. And I just want to say thanks to Harry and Bob. Those were really fantastic readings. I'm not sure if I can follow that properly, but I'll do my best. I write fantasy romance. I have 2 series out now, The Chronicles of Tournai and Elemental Magicae. They're both available from 9 Star Press. Today I'm going to read from The Dragon's Devotion, which is one of the books in the Chronicles of Tournai series. It's not the newest. It's kind of right in the middle. Just, I know, maybe a little weird, but it's a dragon shifter story, and I've been writing more dragon shifters, so it felt appropriate. So in this book, well, The Chronicles of Tournai is a series of kind of linked standalone books. They all revolve around the royal family of the Principality of Tournai. In this one, we have Quarantin, who is a scholar with a secret. He is a dragon shifter, and he's keeping that a secret because of a lot of things that happened to dragon shifters in the past. And we have Bastian, who is an earl who inherited the title much earlier than he thought he would when his parents died, and he has just found out years later that his parents' death and the death of his aunt and uncle, who were the prince and princess at the time, which they all thought was an accident, was not really an accident. So he gets embroiled in that, and Quarantin gets embroiled in it with him. So in the scene I'm going to read, it's actually just after Quarantin has revealed to Bastian that he is a dragon shifter, and he decides to show Bastian what his dragon looks like. And this one is, so it's a little bit about what, you know, Bastian's reaction and what Quarantin kind of is. So, all right, so I'll read, and then, yeah, if anybody has any questions after, I'll try to answer. Okay, here we go. Bastian didn't know what he expected, if he expected anything in particular, when Quarantin began to use his talent to change himself into a dragon. change himself into a dragon, a phrase Bastien never dreamed he'd have cause to think. What a turn his life had taken. Silver purple light obscured Corentin's form, twirling and twining around him, and then growing larger and larger, expanding up and out, with Corentin hidden in the center of the shimmering radiance. Bastien took a step back, unsure of what would happen, not wanting to interfere, but the light spread no further, only shifted to a steady glow, and after a moment began to fade away until it was gone entirely. Bastien blinked against the sudden darkness, with only the soft light of the lantern to alleviate it after the brilliant light of magic. When his vision adjusted, he gasped. Where Corentin had stood only a moment ago was a large dragon. Bastien stared, his gaze traveling over the astonishing creature sitting in front of him. The dragon, Corentin. The dragon was Corentin, and he had to remember that, or he might be as terrified as he was awed. Corentin was a magnificent sight. He was enormous and sinuous, with a powerful body and a long neck, and wings folded over his back. His body, except for his wings, seemed to be entirely covered in scales that glistened in the light from the lantern. In the near dark, Bastien couldn't tell what color the scales were, and he very much wanted to know. Because Corentin was beautiful, and Bastien wanted to see all of him, to remember this sight forever. The first time he saw Corentin as a dragon. He looked up, meeting Corentin's eyes, and opened his mouth to ask about the color of his scales, which was probably a ridiculous question, both for its subject and for the fact that Bastien didn't know if Corentin could talk as a dragon. Could dragons talk? In the stories, they mostly roared and breathed fire. But the stories obviously weren't correct. Except that dragons did exist. And he was rambling even in his thoughts. He nearly laughed at himself, but then he realized how wary Corentin looked. He wouldn't have thought a dragon, so large and fierce, could look wary. But somehow Corentin did. Corentin must be worried about his reaction. Could he not see how in awe Bastien was? How beautiful Bastien thought he was? How honored he felt to be trusted with this secret? Bastien ached to reassure Corentin, to show him he wasn't afraid. He was as drawn to Corentin the dragon as to Corentin the man. His fingers itched to reach out and touch the dragon's scales. Bastien took a step forward and raised a hand. He froze and met Corentin's eyes again. They were focused on him, the light of the lantern reflected in their surface. But Bastien couldn't tell if they were the same brilliant violet as Corentin's were as a man. He hoped they were. He suddenly realized how much he loved the color. May I? He asked hesitantly. Corentin nodded his large head. Yes, if you like. Bastien's mouth fell open just a bit when Corentin spoke. His voice was even deeper, a rumble that was almost a purr. Slowly, Bastien smiled and laid his hand against Corentin's side. The scales were hard and silky smooth, and warm. Somehow he hadn't expected them to be so warm. But there was nothing about Corentin that was ever cold. Bastien found himself stroking Corentin's side, enjoying the feel of the scales under his hand. Corentin made a sound of pure pleasure and seemed to relax into the soft caresses. You are amazing like this. Bastien let the words out on a breath of air and felt his cheeks flame. Only like this? Corentin's half-closed eyes danced as he teased. He lowered his head to be level with Bastien's. Bastien let out a huff of laughter and shook his head. You're impossible, but amazing. I shouldn't have said a word about it. He hadn't meant to, but the admission had slipped out because Corentin was a dragon, and Bastien couldn't quite get that to make sense yet. I can't believe you're a dragon. What color are you like this? Befuddlement was clear on Quarrenton's face, clearer than Bastian might have thought any emotion could be on the face of a dragon. Color? Bastian could feel his face burning again. It's too dark for me to tell what color your scales are, even in the lantern light. Dark purple, almost black. Really? He couldn't say why that delighted him. Quarrenton nodded. Yes, there's a metallic sheen to them. Bastian peered at the scales beneath his hand, wishing he could see them better. I'd love to see you in daylight. Are all dragons the same color? No, there are many different colors. They seem to run in families and clans. Fascinating. Clans? We lived in clans all over before the hunts. There are still clan groupings, but there's been more intermingling since we all live close together. Interesting. There wasn't before? There was. There were dragons who formed bonds with those who didn't have the dragon talent too, as there still are today, but there was less opportunity. Some marriages were contracted over the distance, or because of clan members traveling and meeting. Far fewer, though. Bastian could sit and listen to Quarrenton talk about the dragon talent and the history of his people all day, or night, and never be bored. He wanted to lean into the warm bulk of Quarrenton's side and do just that. So there are people who live among you who don't have the talent. Yes, there were families, friends of the clans, who fled with them years ago, who never had the talent. And there are always people who don't inherit it, or who inherit it in a weaker form that doesn't allow them to change, but might give them some of the other powers, the fire, for instance. Can you breathe fire like this? Quarrenton let out a huff. No, you saw what I can do with fire. That doesn't change whether I'm in this form or the other. I'm only asking. I don't know anything about your talent. Quarrenton sighed. I know, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Bastian reached up and stroked his hand over Quarrenton's jaw. The scales were smaller, but still silky. Thank you for sharing this with me. Quarrenton nuzzled his large head into Bastian's hand. I shouldn't have told you, I suppose, but I wanted to so much. Before Bastian could say anything, the wind gusted, and he shivered as it cut through his cloak. Are you cold? Quarrenton asked. Without waiting for an answer, he unfolded one wing. Bastian sucked in a breath in wonder as the delicate panes of it stretched between the arching bones, and wrapped it around Bastian, cuddling him close and shielding him from the wind. Powerful and strong enough to keep Quarrenton in flight, the wing was gentle and infinitely careful now. We should go back. You've been injured. You shouldn't be out in the chilly air. He didn't want to go back yet, especially not now when Quarrenton had been telling him such interesting things. Quarrenton's gesture was gentle and protective, and Bastian felt almost cherished, held in the curve of his wing. He wasn't ready to give that up. In a little while. Okay, so that's it. So if, hope you enjoyed it. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer. Thank you for the applause in the chat. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's see. Okay, questions. So let's see. Oh, do you know anything about conservation of mass? Not really. I kind of rely on magic for that one, or at least not in this book. You know, maybe in future books, I'm writing a lot more dragon shifters, so we'll see where that goes. Yes, this is a series. This is actually book 5 in the Chronicles of Tournai. They all stand alone though, so you can start with this one or start anywhere you want. And there will be the new, well, I'm re-releasing a couple earlier on in the series through 9 Stars, so they're coming out over the summer. And then the newest book in the series, The Envoy's Honor, which is more Dragon Shifters, should be out hopefully before the end of the year. So that. Okay, any other questions? Maybe not. All right. Oh, there's one in the Q&A, so you just told me. I'm on, my computer decided to go and give me quite a bit of trouble today, so, or this week, so I'm on my phone, I'm juggling. Okay, oh, my covers, they're, Natasha Snow does them. She's amazing, and I'm just thrilled with everyone I get. So I'm super excited about those. And where else will I be in the con? So later today at 6 p.m., I will be on a panel about Ace and Arrow characters in Spec Fic. So I hope I will see some of you there. And I think we may be almost out of time. Oh, okay, so last one, which animals do you draw from to get dragon biology? Yeah, a little of, kind of a little of all the ones you sort of said. Definitely, definitely feel it. So yeah, my dragons are definitely a bit cat-like. But yeah, lizards, dinosaurs, wings are sort of maybe like bat wings with those sort of, the idea of kind of the pains in the wings. So yeah, I kind of take my inspiration all over the place. Plus, you know, lots of dragon lore that I've read for ages. I'm all about dragons. Yeah, this one didn't, hot-blooded or cold-blooded. Yeah, this one definitely Corentin is not really, didn't really care that it was chilly out. He tends to produce quite a bit of his own heat. Kind of go with the idea of, you know, dragons and fire, so they tend to kind of not have to worry too much about outside temperatures. Okay, so I think we're about out of time, so I will hand you over to, hopefully you'll all wait for the next panel. And it was great to see you all. Thank you for coming to our readings. Please stick around for the next one. I hope to see you later at 6 for the Ace and Arrow character panel too. Thanks, everybody.